Hello everyone. Today's video is just a heartfelt message from myself to parents of teenagers. As I was trying to come up with today's video topic, I was just thinking about things I've always wanted to explain to parents, and in the busyness of a well check, we don't always get the chance to sit down with you as a parent alone and explain what we're doing and why we're doing it. So one of the things that comes up frequently is, if you've had a well visit with your teenager lately, you know this. Your pediatrician is most likely going to ask you for a few moments to step outside of the room so that we can have a few moments alone with your teenager. Now, for some reason I don't understand, some parents take this the wrong way and are extremely offended by it, as if I think maybe they perceive that we want to give some sort of message to their teenager in a private situation in which the parents couldn't listen in, and that's actually not our goal. So I want to just send a message as a representative of all pediatricians to all the parents of teenagers out there. We're on the same page, guys. We want for your teen to thrive and to be healthy in mind, body, and soul. We want them to have mental health and physical health and to be careful and to be safe. But sometimes, as life is, teens may not feel completely open to share with us when their parent is in the room. Now, I happen to be personally very naive, and I always think that when teenagers tell me something, they're telling the truth, especially if I have asked the parent out of the room. And I have often found myself incorrect. So let me just tell you what we're thinking when we have those very few moments alone with your teenager and what some of our restrictions are. You should know that I would love for you to know all the details that we share in private, but I'm not allowed to reveal those to you. So laws vary by state. I'm in the state of North Carolina. In the state of North Carolina, teenagers have the right to confidentiality when they speak with me about matters pertaining to mental health or to reproductive health. So that's some of what we may be talking about in those few moments alone. For example, the American Academy of Pediatrics encourages all primary care physicians who take care of adolescents to screen for depression, because it's become such a large concern and such a public health matter. So we usually do a screening test called a PHQ-9, or just patient health questionnaire, and it has 9 questions. That's all that means for PHQ-9, but it is a validated screening test for depression in teens. Well, I am allowed by state law to share with you if your teenager has so many concerns that they actually have active thoughts or plans of self-harm, okay? So if they have really a red flag, a very alarming result on that screening test, which is supposed to be done confidentially. I do see some parents helping their teenager fill that out. That's not the point of this thing. They're supposed to do it on their own, and then I'm supposed to look at those results in confidence. And then so sometimes that's what we're talking about when we're alone. I might say, you know what, I'm concerned about some of these answers. Let's talk about that a little bit, and let's see, do you think you could share with your parents that you might need some counseling? And then a lot of times the teen will say, yes, that seems like a good idea. I think I would like to share with my parents that I would like to see a counselor. And then I'll help them hopefully facilitate that conversation with you about their mental health needs. Maybe in this time alone, they had questions for me that they were too embarrassed to ask in front of you. And sometimes those are just things like, I've many times had a teenager just to ask me about acne. And I don't know why they would have been embarrassed to talk about that in front of their parent, but they were, and they wanted to wait until we were alone to discuss it, so we did. Many times they have no questions for me and want for me to quit talking about excessive screen time and sleep hygiene and all the things we have to talk about at a checkup visit, safety and sunscreen and bug spray and all these things. But we do try to do some basic screening during that time alone, hoping for, as I mentioned, more honesty and the chance to get to the real truth, because it is important for us as that teen's primary care physician to know exactly what's going on with them. So we may ask them things like, how is school going really? Have you been bullied? Do you have a good friend group? Are your friends pressuring you to do things you don't want to do? Are you vaping? Are you using alcohol products? Do you feel safe in your own home? Are you sexually active? Do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a girlfriend? how are your periods going if it's a girl. Just all sorts of private questions that they're not always comfortable talking about in front of you guys. Are you ever in a car with someone who's been drinking when they're driving? Have you ever been drinking when you're driving? So we just try to really see what's going on with them. A lot of it involves safety. If you are sexually active, are you on some form of birth control? Do you use a condom each and every time? How many partners total have you had in your life so far? And this is just the way that we assess their risk for sexually transmitted infections. We assess their risk for safety concerns, like with the drinking and driving or texting and driving. So you can see there are all sorts of questions we need to ask them that we feel like we believe they wouldn't be as open about in front of their moms. Now, I can tell you, especially if it's a younger teen and they're extremely shy, sometimes they request that their parent not leave the room. I don't know if they think we're going to give them vaccines behind their parents' back. We would never do that, and generally the physicians don't administer the vaccines anyway. Usually the nurses do that. But for some reason, some kids do not want their parent to leave the room, and that is okay. If it's the teen's choice for the parent not to leave the room, then that's perfectly okay as long as they're comfortable with us discussing these things in front of their mom or dad or whoever brought them to that physical exam. Here's another little trick too. If you are the father who got roped into driving your 14-year-old daughter to their well visit and you are not comfortable discussing menses and flow and all the things we need to talk about at a checkup visit, that's okay. And a lot of times, if I remember in time, because we're just not embarrassed about that stuff at all. We forget that it embarrasses some dads, and some dads it doesn't. But if it does, you are perfectly welcome to sit on a little bench outside the exam room or wait in the waiting room if you want to, or whatever you want to do if you're not comfortable discussing it. And hopefully the teenage girl will be able to discuss it. So a lot of times it's more comfortable if the mom accompanies the teenage girl on those visits, but that's entirely up to you and your family and your dynamics. We are flexible to work with that anyway. So I hope this helps you to know we as pediatricians really want the same things you want. We want your children to be safe and healthy and to thrive and to do well in school and with their peer group and with their self-esteem. We also often screen for body image issues, usually in girls, but it can also be a concern in guys, and things like that sometimes they're not comfortable talking about in front of you. I think through the years, what I've probably seen the most is that many teenagers are not comfortable at all discussing or even contemplating their own sexuality in front of their parents. And I understand this, and yet sometimes it is part of the reason I think that teens are not adequately educated in just how common sexually transmitted infections are, how important either abstinence or completely trying to limit the total number of partners over a lifespan is, and absolute use of a condom each and every time if they do decide to become sexually active. So I think it's so important that parents talk about these things, and even when you have very strongly held beliefs, as our personal family does, it's important to talk about them, because I have known plenty of families who strongly believed in abstinence and waiting until marriage, and they were completely, possibly blissfully unaware that their teens were quite sexually active, even had infections that we would have to treat, and they would just have had no idea. And it's much healthier if you can talk about these things, and it's important medically that you educate your children. Even if you have certain beliefs, you still need to offer that education. I hope you understand what I'm saying, and I hope this video has made sense and that some of you teen parents found it helpful who maybe are nervous to step out of the room, but really what we're trying to teach them is wear their seatbelt and brush their teeth and don't go swimming alone and wear sunscreen and bug spray and use a condom each and every time if you're sexually active, but we'd rather you postpone your sexual debut, is how we phrase it. We would rather you be careful. We would rather you say no to vaping and alcohol use and cigarette use and marijuana use and drug use and all those things that we try to cover in those little private moments together with them. Hope that was helpful. Thank you.